Let's go to Moscow now and speak to Grigory Yavlinsky, leader of Russia's opposition party, Yabloko. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us here on the programme. For the last 8 weeks since this conflict began, we've been seeing horrific images emerge from Ukraine. But if you are sitting in Russia for the last 2 months, just give us the overview of how Russians are viewing the conflict at the moment.
There is enormous pressure from the propaganda in Russia and enormous pressure of police type. So many people are very much afraid of what's going on. But even on official figures, 20% of Russians are against this so-called special military operation.
Are they getting? We keep hearing that state media is controlling the kind of information that the general public get access to. Are they getting information from anywhere else about what's really happening on the ground?
No, in fact, this is not possible for absolute majority of the people. Only very special people who can operate with the internet, they can find out the reality and to find out a different information. For the absolute majority, for 95% of Russians, it's not possible to reach the other news than they have on state television and state press, and there is no other press. There is no other television in Russia anymore.
Yeah, you talk about there being no other press, no other television in Russia anymore. What about opposition movements? You've been a prominent opposition figure for decades in the country, but is there really no strong opposition to what Putin is doing? Because we have been seeing the crackdown on protests. We have been seeing the crackdown and arrest of opposition figures.
It's a very difficult situation. And my party was against this war from the very beginning, even more, I can say. This is our position for a very long period of time. We warned both Russian society and the world politicians about the reality of the danger of the war. This was the main theme and meaning of our campaign in the parliamentary elections last September. Still, the society was not listening, the world was not listening, but it was absolutely clear, especially after the article which was written by Mr. Putin in July last year, that he is going to start the real war.
In fact, that 5,000-word article really laid out his views on Ukraine, on the region, on Russia's ambitions and his own ambitions.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right.
And yet you think that the world, despite those alarm bells, really didn't quite understand or just didn't think to take any action then?
Yes, didn't listen, don't want to understand. And by the way, I want to say that previous events, which also was created by Russian political and economic system, authoritarian system, which is, I would say, oligarchic system, created the war before. It was a terrible war in the Caucasus against Chechnya. It was a war against Georgia. It started the war in Syria. And honestly saying, the West was very balanced, if it is possible to say, in all these events. And even loans and money was coming to Russia when Russia was completely bombing Chechnya and Northern Caucasus in the middle of 90s and later in the beginning of 2000s.
So you're saying that if the world, even today, puts their foot down, especially when it comes to Russian gas and oil, its energy, that this conflict could end within weeks?
Let us be very serious. I don't think that this perspective is realistic. It's not a question of paying or not paying money to Russia. This is not a tool to stop the nuclear power of such size like Russia is. It is very important to understand that. I think this is now after that happened already, it'll be a very long and painful, catastrophic story, first of all for Ukrainians, but also it's a real catastrophe for Russia.
What do you think of Vladimir Putin's state of mind? Because there's a lot of rumours, discussion about him being locked down during COVID, looking at old maps, that his state of mind is not stable. Is this something that you have any kind of insight into?
I have no insight, but I want to say that as far as I see it, Putin no longer listens to opposing points of view at all. And disinformation has reached all levels in Russian state and Russian military and in Kremlin itself. So all this situation is very dangerous, since the problem of the use of chemical or even nuclear weapons is on the surface. At the situation which was creating in last 2 months, Putin have nothing to lose. Russia is already facing a big transatlantic political and military sanctions, and the alliance made these sanctions, and it's imposed historically tough sanctions against his country, I mean Putin's country. So it's a real danger.
But do you think ultimately it won't be the war that brings people of Russia out onto the streets, but the economic situation, the pressure that the average people will face, which will then put pressure on the Kremlin, on Putin?
I understand what you're asking me. First of all, it wouldn't happen now. If that something like that would happen, it will be in autumn, not just now. That's what I think. Besides this, I want to say that it's also very dangerous situation, because what the people would be told by the authorities, that there is the enemies of Russia, the West, for example, and Europe, they created this poverty and they created this terrible situation. So it can be a very nationalistic left side movement, political, which Putin wants to be a leader of this movement, and he already did the steps on this direction. So it's not a clear situation what would happen with this.
Mr. Yavlinsky, really fascinating hearing your views. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.